Hello, it's the 23rd of December, which I mentioned because tomorrow's the 24th of December, which is Christmas Eve, and brutally early tomorrow morning I'm going back to my parents' house to celebrate Christmas. So this is my last night here at home. It's my last night working on heat signature before Christmas. I was going to say this year, but actually I probably will work on it between Christmas and New Year, because, you know, why not? But it was important to me to have a kind of, I was going to say, to have a cut-off date. So, you know, I very principally decided that at the absolute last minute I would stop working on it and not just stay here in my house alone over Christmas instead of going to my family. There's no element of self-control here, there's no discipline. I just, really just celebrating the fact that I finished working on heat signature before the Christmas break. And there will obviously be a more significant date when I am finishing heat signature for the year, but to be honest, it's going to be, I mean, maybe not New Year's Eve, but the date, no, it probably will be New Year's Eve. It'll be the day of New Year's Eve, not the evening, but that day. And then the next day, I'll work on it again, even if I'm hungover. So that's a non-milestone. This is the only time that I'm going to stop working on heat signature, go and do something else for a while, and the year isn't going to technically end, but something's going to happen. It'll be significant, and then after that, I'll come back to it. So what I'm trying there's a long word that means I'm coming around to my point of justifying that I'm just celebrating the end of a year or working on heat signature. And for that reason I'm drinking Armagnac. It is I would describe it as a snifter of a bottle of Armagnac that my dad bought me from France, where that stuff is good and cheap. Or, you know, for any given quality level it's cheaper than it would be here, and therefore for any given amount of money you want to spend, the stuff will be better. And it has an amazing smell. And I'm reserving this bottle of Armagnac just for heat signature milestones. For complicated reasons, milestones and heat signature won't necessarily be I have finished this particular aspect of the game completely and will never touch it again. It's going to be much more to do with, like, it's the end of December. And I spent my time in that month doing stuff that was worth doing, and it was a miscellany of stuff. It was a random assortment that I switched between without any evident rhyme or reason. But as long as all of the things I worked on were important and had to be done, then it was a good month, and that's a milestone. So this is a milestone. The last thing I just did was I was meant to be doing interior ship generation, making the layouts more interesting, and I did loads and loads and loads of that, but I didn't quite finish it. I had a couple of other things I wanted to get done for this kind of phase of it. But while I was working on it, I suddenly kind of had a flash of inspiration about how zooming could work and about how tiling background layers could work, so that instead of being restricted to these discrete levels of zoom where you snap between kind of this close, that close, that close, that close, and we jump you from local zoom to map mode, basically. I had an idea for how we could fill in all those gaps and let you just smoothly zoom from one thing to the other, which is a thing that was kind of, I'd already added as an experimental feature, and it looked kind of shit because of various technical restrictions, and I found a way to solve those technical restrictions, and I was so excited about it that I just thought, I'm just going to code this right now, I'm just going to do it now, because that is, I really think that is the way to do it. Like, if you're excited about a feature and you know how to do it, and you've got an idea for, like, not just, I would like this to be done, but I know how to do it, I've thought of the method, that is the time to code that, because coding requires an enormous amount of, like, mental presence. You need the whole problem all in your head all at once, and you need to be so in tune with it and on top of it. If you have a great idea and you're excited about it and then you leave it a month and you come back to it later, it's so much harder to just think, how is this going to work? And even if you remember the actual technical details, even if you get all the facts right, the kind of spark isn't there. You're not thinking, it's not exciting to you that you can do it this way. The moment when you have that idea, the first time you think, I can do it this way, I know, that will work, that is the time to code it, because that will, it will be fresh in your mind, and it will be exciting, it will be satisfying, and if it does work, it will be brilliant, and if it doesn't work, you'll be sort of energized to solve the problem. Like, if I have an idea and then you tell me, no, that doesn't work for this reason, I'm like, oh, okay, so what if we did this? Whereas if that's been in my plan for like a month as like the way I'm going to do it, and then you tell me it doesn't work. And by you, I mean Game Maker. Game Maker says, error, this doesn't, or you try it and it doesn't behave the way you expect it to. Then it's just like, oh man, I thought I'd solved that and I haven't. Anyway, so for many, many reasons, doing things when you are inspired about them is a great thing to do. And so for that reason, I've just been working on a random miscellany of things, and the latest one of those is zoom and texturing and sort of, it's very hard to sort of summarize what it is. It's about background layers tiling, which you already had working, but then how to have those scale as you zoom in and out smoothly and phase between each other in a smooth way, and also not look conspicuously repeating, and also have stars without those seeming to repeat. And also then, if you can do that, the only point in doing that is if you're going to have smooth zooming between local zoom and galactic map. And then there's a question of like, why would you zoom between those levels? Is that important? Is it good? Does it look cool? Does it add something to the game? The answer is yes, 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 and yes. It looks amazing. There's loads of cool stuff that can happen at those zoom levels, and it genuinely adds something functional to the game. Two things functional to the game. One is a huge sense of scale. If the camera pans out slowly, you get this magnificent sense of just the like epic scale of the universe and how enormous this place is and how beautiful it looks. Whereas if you jump between zoom levels, you see everything at that level, zoom level, you see everything at that zoom level. There's no confusion or hidden information, but you just don't feel it. You just don't have that sense of scale. You can kind of tell, oh, if that last frame was this big and this frame is that big, then I guess I'm seeing a really big area. But that's so different to the smooth zoom emotional feel of scale. So that's one thing. And then the other functional thing is that one of the core mechanics, I don't know if it's core, but one of the important mechanics of the game is if you do get shot aboard a spaceship, the enemies will kick you out of the airlock, and then you'll be ejected through space and you have to chase yourself in the ship. And previously that was kind of, while you were chasing yourself, you had to manually use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out depending on how far away you were. Like keep zooming out till you can see yourself, then chase and chase and chase. As you get closer, manually zoom in. And lots of people didn't get the hang of that, or they stayed way zoomed out, or they zoomed too far in, all that kind of stuff. Then I added auto zoom, and it would scale perfectly so that the player and the ship would always be both on screen, and the ship would be in the centre of the screen, the player would be on the edge of the screen, and as you got closer, the camera would smoothly zoom in perfectly, which is good in theory, but if you have no texture to the background, you can't tell the difference between the player getting further away. By the player, I mean the person who's ejected from the pod, like the pod is trying to pick up the injured person. The person getting further away, or the camera zooming in. The camera zooming in is a good thing, it's getting you finer control because you got closer and everything's great, but you're still dealing with a level of zoom that's so far away that the player is just an icon and the ship is just an icon. And so those two things getting closer together has no visual difference to the camera zooming out. And the camera zooming in looks just the same as those things getting further apart. And so I wasn't playing it and thinking, oh, I don't know whether the camera just got closer or whatever. I was just zooming and dusting and trying to catch myself and just feeling a bit slippery and not quite getting it as well as I used to be able to. And now with these texture scaling vapor layers, basically a way of making sure that at every zoom level there is a sort of cloud rushing past you if you're travelling, and if you're stopped, then that cloud is stopped, and you have a much better sense of motion. And then also if you zoom in, you will see, it's kind of like a fractal. Have you ever seen like one of those fractal animations where it keeps zooming in on one thing, and no matter how close it goes, there's always more detail to be seen, and the old detail just is gone past the camera. I basically found a way to do that, but with clouds, and that means that when you're chasing yourself, suddenly you can tell the difference. When the camera zooms in, you see the vapor get bigger and go past the camera, and so you know it's the camera zooming in and not the player getting further away. And you wouldn't, on paper that sounds like an academic difference that you'd have to calculate and factor into mental judgments, but in fact it just happens on a totally intuitive level. You know that you're getting closer, it's getting better, you need to thrust less, you need to use finer control and all that stuff. And it's not a huge difference, it's just, I just find myself doing better, and so I didn't expect that, I didn't realise that was a problem, and I accidentally solved that problem, so yay!